Yeah, we're live. That's a little after 7:12. I missed it by a little bit. Sorry about that, guys. I was actually out at the auto parts store grabbing a water pump for my truck. It's been leaking for a couple of weeks now. And I decided, you know what, it's finally time to fix that before it leaves me stranded. So I had to go over and grab that at the last minute. I'm cleaning stuff up from all the testing that we did. It's been about 2 weeks down here at Wastegate. So lots of stuff to cover. Obviously, we had the piston flip test that I'm sure that most of you guys have seen. We did a great live feed with Dulcich and Freiberger, which is awesome. Thank you guys for doing that with me and sitting down. Their time is very valuable, and so I'm sure that they all want to take off after getting done with all the shooting. So it was awesome of them to sit down and talk about this, and we can talk about this a little bit, but we're actually on to more things. To give you an idea, I've already run the 3800 Series 3 Supercharged V6 with all kinds of stuff, all kinds of mods. I ran it with a turbo. We run it compound. We've done lots and lots of cool stuff. Also, I've done a stand start on the 2.2 liter Chrysler motor, which is also awesome. We've done lots of tests on the Magnum, other than the piston thing. Different camshafts and intake manifolds, and we ran various different 4-barrel intake manifolds on the Magnum for engine masters. We did some nitrous tuning. We did all kinds of cool stuff. So there's lots of stuff to talk about here. And I guess we'll start off with a piston flip thing, and I thought it was an awesome test. And all of this goes back to way back to when, because this actually flipping the piston thing there's nothing to do with Uncle Tony. It started way before him. It goes all the way back to the Mopar manual, the Bible that they use, which is a conglomeration of tech bulletins, I guess, that they put together. And it goes back way farther than that. I mean, they weren't the first guys to think, hey, let's check the offset of the piston. There were lots and lots of sharp guys that have been in the automotive industry before all of us were even born. So it's nobody's thing. And this all came out, and this is something I want to get on. I talked to David Vizard today, who has some really cool videos up, and I'll be helping promote those. We'll take a look at, because nobody gets into depth like David does in terms of actually showing you what works and what doesn't work and why. And he's done endless testing, and very few people have ported things the way that he has, and to that extent. And he's able to cover it in detail, which is awesome stuff. But I talked to him today, and I want to go back on Uncle Tony's deal with David, and we want to talk about a number of different things. One of them obviously is going to be this piston flip thing. In my mind, the most amazing thing about this test, one, that it even happened. First of all, it started off as I got a call from these guys at Engine Masters, and David said, hey, Richard, can you come down? Steve won't be able to make it. Can you sit in for him? And I said, look, anything for Steve, because he's my guy. So, and he said, well, you've been testing a lot. Do you have any ideas that you think would be good that we can use for Engine Masters? And I said, yeah, I bought this Magnum, this 5.9 Magnum, specifically to do this piston flip test. It has offset in it. It's a factory motor. Hopefully it wasn't rebuilt. It's a factory motor, and it should work fine for this kind of test. I'm going to do this regardless. And this is something I told Tony when I was on his live feed. And my point was, and this is my discussion that I'll have with him when I go on the live feed, is that I have no vested interest either way. If somebody comes up to me and says, yes, it works, until they show me the data, that's an opinion. If somebody comes up to me and says it doesn't work, until they show me the data, that's an opinion. And since I don't care about either one of those, I told Tony on his live feed, I said, I'm going to test this because I think that this is cool, I love these like little old school, like speed secret things, all these kinds of tricks. I think that they're awesome. And as a dyno guy, when you test something, you want there to be a change. The best thing is that when you test something and you gain power, that's number one. Sometimes you test things and they lose power, but that's also something that happened. There was a change there. So that means one of the things that you tested was better than the other, which is also a good result. The other thing is, and the thing that I didn't want to happen is this is exactly what happened, is that there was no change at all. And when I say no change, that's the whole amazing thing about this test, is that this motor from the junkyard, and we're going to talk a little bit about why a junkyard motor is actually better for that than a brand new motor, because a lot of guys are saying, no, you need to do this with a brand new fresh motor. No, you actually don't, because that one's going to change in power where a junkyard motor will not, because it's already been run in. You're not going to see more ring seal, and you're not going to see less because it already has that. But I bought this motor for this test. And the amazing thing was, even though it's a junkyard motor, that when we ran it, this thing repeated within the decimal point of 1 horsepower. Now, you have to be very careful about what you're doing, very meticulous, because if you change the oil temperature or water temperature by more than a very small amount, then you will change the power. To put that into perspective, we had 3 runs when we did the baseline test that overlaid. The peak power on one of them was 399.9, and the peak power on one of them was, or 299.9, and the peak power on one of them was 300.2. So you won't get any closer than that. And not only were the peak numbers that close, but the whole curve from the load in all the way out. So this thing was like what I would call more than perfectly repeatable. The amazing thing about all of this is that when we made all of the changes doing the piston swap, so we swapped pistons from one side to the other. So now that all of the arrows were facing the other way, you have changed the thrust load from the major side to the minor side. You have changed effectively cam timing. You could have changed ring seal, and I don't mean ring seal, and we're going to discuss that, but I mean ring seal because of the loading on the piston. You could have potentially changed that at TDC. You're changing the acceleration rate to and away from TDC. You're changing a lot of things. The thing is that even though we're changing all these things, when you do the math on them, the amount that you're changing them is like, you almost can't even see it. You almost can't even measure it. And so when we did all of this and put this thing all back together, again, this thing repeated within a decimal point of 1 horsepower. So the thing is, and then when you overlay the 3 graphs of the after test with the 3 graphs of the before test, they all overlay as though they were one run. I've seen variations in tests without any changes that are more than these were. So they're next to nothing. The amazing thing is that we took pistons out of one hole and put it in another hole, and the thing ran exactly the same. And this is what I'm talking about, the guys that were saying, hey, you needed to have the rings in the cylinder where they needed to stay in that cylinder. Obviously, that's not the case, because the argument is that, well, you lost power from the ring seal, but you gained power from the piston flip. and apparently nobody's caught on to this, that if that were to happen, and again, I would like to see that, if that were to happen, that would mean that we had the exact amount of loss from ring seal everywhere in the RPM range, and anybody that knows about ring seal would know that that would vary during the RPM range. Exactly the same amount through the whole RPM range that we lost from piston seal that we gained from flipping the pistons. It didn't happen. Nothing happened. There was no gain. There was no change in power. And it's amazing that we got this thing as repeatable as we could, given and I was talking to Freiberg and Dulcich about this, and we might have mentioned this in the live feed that we did with those guys, that even just taking a motor apart and putting it back together exactly the same without changing anything, getting it to do again what we did is an impressive feat. Getting it to do it, given the changes that we made, is even more so. And so for me, it shows without a shadow of a doubt that there is no power to be measured from doing this. I mean, we don't see it on the dyno. If we don't see it on the dyno, you're not going to see it in ET in mile an hour. So to me, that part of it is dead. There's no. We get a lot of people that are arguing around that and trying to nitpick things, and because they want it to be true, and they're trying to find ways that to circumvent the actual data to where it's not true. But it is true. It didn't work. But that's not the end of the story. And this is what I kind of want to talk to Tony about. And that's that there are limitations in what an engine dyno does. One of them we always talk about. One of them, we don't start the load at 1,000 RPM. So if we were to test on a chassis dyno out on the street or at the track, you could do that. You know, you're starting your acceleration run from a much lower engine speed. And so it could be that you see something there that we don't see on the engine dyno because we're only down at, let's say, 2,500 in this run. So there's something that could be done. There's something that could be seen there. The other thing is, on an engine dyno, we are controlling the rate of acceleration. In this case, and this is what we normally test at, it would be 300 RPM per second. So the dyno is controlling how the motor accelerates and then just measuring the power at each one of those points. On a chassis dyno, the rate of acceleration is determined by the power output because we have a fixed resistance in a sense. We have a fixed roller size, diameter, and weight. So if you increase the power output that you apply to that, then it's going to change its rate of acceleration. So if this kind of piston flip thing did something, then it might be that you would see that on the chassis dyno where you wouldn't see it on the engine dyno, just because this change in measuring technique. One of the things I can say about that is that I've never seen repeatability on any chassis dyno, certainly not with an automatic transmission, because that's kind of silly, but the repeatability on a chassis dyno that you can get on an engine dyno. That's not to put down a chassis dyno. It's just that there are so many other variables that are going along with that that can cost or cause 1 horsepower difference. So that would be much harder to do on a chassis dyno, but it might show something that's not there that we can't see on an engine dyno. So I'm open to that being a potential thing. So that's my discussion on the piston flip thing. The guys that were saying, oh, it's going to be 7 horsepower, 10 horsepower, we saw stuff that guys were claiming, oh, it's 30 horsepower. It's not any of that. It could be this other thing if we measure it differently. But it's not anything substantial. And we talked to a lot of really, really sharp guys. We called Billy Godbold. We talked to the guys from Molly and JE, and I think he talked to another piston manufacturer, Diamond or somebody, and maybe Total Seal. So we went, and especially to give those guys nothing but credit, the Freiberger and Dulcich, they really went down the rabbit hole. They wanted to find out the ifs and whys and wheres on all of this stuff and all of the math so that they could really understand this and talk intelligently about it, which he does very well in the episode of Engine Masters. Again, the problem is that even though you can cover all of the things that it potentially changed, they're very small, and you also can't, if there was a change, let's say that we saw magically 10 horsepower, how do you determine which of those things were responsible for all of it, or how do you divvy up to the different things, the different things that they were responsible for individually? And it would be a difficult thing. So that's the piston flip thing. So on to new. If you guys have any questions, I would be happy to answer things if you want. It was awesome to do this test and to see this thing repeatable and to see the ring thing work out in the different cylinders. And again, the reason that I wouldn't want to do it on a new motor is because the motor will probably break in while we're doing this, and you'll see a change just from that. We see that during a break-in procedure. While the dyno is going through a computer-controlled break-in procedure, we'll see the load number change because the rings are sealing. So it will do that. This didn't do that because the rings are already sealed. Although I would be open to running this thing a lot more and finding out if the rings seal up better, and then if magically, like I said, there was exactly the same amount of loss from ring seal as there was a gain from the piston flipping, which I don't think is a real thing. But I'm always open to it because I don't want one thing to be true and not want the other thing to be true. I could care less. That doesn't matter to me. Other cool stuff on the 2.2 liter Dodge that I got from the wrecking yard from the 600, the 1984 version, non-intercooled, draw-through throttle body stuff. We'll walk over. As a matter of fact, let's walk over now and we'll take a look at that, because I might have to grab an extension cord sometime during the night. But we'll take a walk over there. But the cool thing is it is a runner. With Ish's help from Wastegate, who is awesome and spent, I'm sure, a lot more time than he should have, but he's awesome. He got this thing hooked up on the, so here's the 3800. Look at the fancy red and black. That is a Gen 5 supercharger. You can see we tried different pulleys on there. So we got other ones. We got another one over here. This one is a 3.4, I think. So thank you to whoever sent me this blower a long time ago with this hub and stuff. I actually bought some stuff from maybe the guys at ZZP. I haven't put them on yet, but here is the Dodge, the 2.2 liter. And as you can see, it has a Holley HP management system on it. And I'll go ahead and give you guys the quickie zoom here. So you can see I LS swapped the Dodge distributor on an LS3. We have everything hooked up. I made sure that the fuel rail didn't leak. It was not without its excitement. But the factory fuel rail did not burn in the fire. It was fine. We put a set of 24-pound injectors in there. Can't see. I'm trying to get that. And we actually ran it on E85. See, it's got the draw-through throttle body. It's got the log style manifold. Has a factory turbo and stuff on there. But the cool thing is we ran it. It has oil pressure. It had like 60 or more pounds of oil pressure. We started it up. First, we started it up with just running it on brake clean, which was awesome because since we had a crank signal, which the distributor worked out fantastic. We had a crank signal that all worked out good, and then we hooked up the fuel injectors and Ish did this magic tune on the 4-cylinder deal, and that thing started up. So it is a runner, which is good. Obviously we didn't have any water in it or anything, but stand starting a motor is always awesome. And I got to run we got to, have that thing make noise. And that's always the best part of it. It's always most exciting when you get to start the thing up, and to do a stand start on it was, kind of even better. The 3800 so far, I have run, we got the thing running. We got it up on the dyno. If you saw the video that I posted today, we did what is essentially a head swap on it, because I ran the motor the way that it came from the wrecking yard. And then I had to fix the cylinder head because it had, more leak down and stuff than we would have wanted. And I tried here, I'm going in the office here. See if my cord is still in here. It was not making the power that it should have. So I took the heads off and I did the razor blade rebuild, where we just scratched the surface and then used a drill and some grinding compound, polishing compound, lapping compound, and used the drill to spin all that. And, that way we could put a nice pattern on the valves, because if you saw any of the photos, I think I put a couple of photos up there of especially the exhaust valves were pitted pretty bad. And we got a good pattern. We got a decent pattern on all of them, and that seemed to work out okay. We put that back on, but that didn't do it. So I decided, well, you know what? I can either stop here, or I can go make this happen, get in make it happen mode. And that's exactly what we did. I took both heads off. No, I take that back. We did. We took both heads off, took them down to L&R. Derek hooked me up, and they basically did a quick surface. They did a valve job, and they also did new seats because the seats are bad. He said, "Hey, look, Richard, these heads are cracked." And I said, "You know what? At this point, I don't care about the crack. It's not gonna be bad enough where it's gonna make things not work. And eventually, we'll replace them with some ported heads anyway. So all of that should work out okay." We put the heads back on. The power was up quite a bit, as you saw from the video. And then after we did that, then we had plenty of testing to do. So we ran a cold air intake. Hopefully you guys can still hear me. We ran an air intake. Now this is a Series 3 motor. It has the big throttle body on it already. It has the 4-bolt throttle body on it. We ran that. I ran the open throttle body most of the time. Then we tried a radius entry, you know, a cool Super Richie air intake kind of thing. We also tried somebody had sent me a set of long tube headers. So whoever sent me the long tube headers, thank you very much. The long tube headers, we tried those, replaced the stock stuff. Both of them had a 3-inch exhaust basically, and at the power levels we were at, it was fine. Then we did I actually swapped that blower on that allowed me to change pulleys. So when we swapped that blower on, it had a 3.4 pulley. And then the next one I think is a 3.2. I'm going to measure it. I don't think it's all the way down at 3 inches, but I'll have to measure that and find out. That will be the next video that comes up. Then I've also run this thing with we put a turbo on it. I put the GT45 turbo on it. We ran it with an air-to-water intercooler, but obviously between the blower and the turbo. So, you know, it's still got to go through the blower and do what the blower does and heat up the air. And because I was going to do this we were going to use it in Engine Masters, this was rush. This is work till midnight or 1 o'clock kind of thing. And we were getting it ready for the next day's shoot. And the V6s were fighting us because I already had one. I had an L67. I had a Series 2 motor, and that had a bunch of dead holes in it. And so I went and got another one, got the Series 3 from the wrecking yard and brought it back, and then had those problems that we went over. And so I didn't have enough time to hook everything up. I wanted back pressure data, especially because having the blower on there and making the power that we're making in a compound setup, I wanted to see what the back pressure was. The other thing that I wanted that I didn't get is charge temperature readings. We didn't hook up any temperature readings. And the other thing that I wanted was I didn't get a reading of boost. We only got a reading in the manifold below the blower. I wanted a reading between the turbo and the blower. And this is something we can revisit when we do more testing, because we are doing more testing. But I wanted that data. It would have been nice to have temperature readings coming out of the intercooler too, to see what the temperature of the air was going into the blower before we have temperature, you know, after the blower. But we did not have that. Now the wastegate for the turbo was a Turbo Smart, the Hypergate 45. We had a 7-pound spring in it. We had it referenced between the turbo and the blower, because if you have it referenced down at the blower's already making more than 7 pounds, so it will just open the wastegate as soon as you get into the throttle all the time, as soon as the boost reaches 7 pounds. You don't want it to do that. You want the boost from the turbo, between the turbo and the blower, to be 7 pounds, and then that will open the wastegate. So the turbo will theoretically always supply 7 pounds to the blower, but the flow rate will go up, because that same pressure at a higher power level obviously is going to make more power. So it was an interesting thing. It was kind of a cool deal, and it all worked out. We ran pump gas, we ran E85, we did lots of different testing on all of this, and on the compound system it ran a lot of boost. So that's not unusual for us to see that. You know, when you run a compound deal like I did when we ran the 03 Cobra motor with the guys from HP Performance, you know, we had 11 pounds of boost from the blower because we ran it by itself. We ran 7 pounds of boost from the turbo, and it didn't equate to 18 pounds. It equated to 22 or 23 pounds or 22 pounds, I think, in that case. So it was a lot. You know, compounding. That's the thing. When you add positive pressure in front of the blower gets really pretty efficient. It can move a lot of air when you do that. Tim, I've asked that question several times, which Jeff Smith is in the chat. So we've covered the 3800, we've covered the 2.2, we've covered the piston flip. We did a lot of Magnum testing also. We ran a couple of different Magnum 4-barrel intake manifolds. We also ran the stock kegger. We ran a modified kegger. We did a bunch of stuff for Engine Masters, which will be coming out, which is really, really cool stuff. Freiberger and I, when we had one of the dual planes on there, even did a shootout, because his go-to is the open spacer, and that's what everybody said when I posted the deal on the 4-hole spacer. And then we ran the 4-hole spacer versus the open spacer. We even put 20 bucks on it. He won. only because he's really smart. Only because of the way he phrased his bet. But the result is actually really, really interesting because technically he also lost. So it's it's always fun when we're getting together and doing that stuff. So let's see what questions you guys have, and we'll try to answer those and get going. I got to make sure I'm done right at 60 minutes. I have the 3800 still in the dyno. That has to come off. I have lots of cleaning to do. I need to get home and see my wife, who I miss. Turbo my RAM. Do you know software so I can tune my own 2014? I don't know about who. Does anybody have any tuning recommendations for a 2014 Dodge Ram? I wired the wastegate shut on my Grand National, blew the motor, doing a huge burnout. Yeah, it will definitely do that. And the other interesting thing is a lot of guys were concerned, and we'll go over this when I do the video on the compound thing. They're concerned about the bypass valve. The bypass valve worked fine. It did not change what happened. It worked good, and it worked good supercharged, and it worked the way that it's supposed to under boost. VK, you missed the 2.2 talk. What I did, we managed to get the 2.2 started, and it is a runner. It sounded good. We did a stand start on it. I'll be doing a full video on that so you guys can check it out and see what it took for me to get everything hooked up to make that work. Are you planning to keep? I'm planning to keep the Omni, yes. Dave should have given you $40, not just 20. I know we all agreed. We know which one we would have picked given the change in power. So Rytrap says that air is always being pushed into the engine, even naturally aspirated, because there's 14 psi. Where the pressure working on that? Is it being drawn in by the downward moving piston, or is it being forced in by the atmospheric pressure? That's always the argument. Yeah, I think Tony's live with David tonight with Vizard, because I talked to David today. We talked about he's going to port I'm going to send him the aluminum head for the 2.2 Chrysler motor, and he's going to port that, so that'll be awesome. Richard wanted to put an exhaust on my 6-liter L76 with AFM. I don't know what is E-inch. Is that infinity? What is right above there? Well, you have a 3 and a 4 above the E key, which I'm sure that you pressed incorrectly, but either one of those will be fine. It can't be too big, so don't worry about that. "2014 Dodges can be tuned with HP tuners." Arc to Triumph, I flipped my air cleaner lid. See, that's like real stuff. And we were trying so hard to Troy and I, who is awesome, and thanks Troy for your help, and thanks to Eric and Ish at Westech for helping me with all this nonsense. But we were trying like heck to get the salad bowl to run on on the Magnum. Any experience with Knowledge wires? That's interesting that you brought that up. We were trying to think of the name of the company that had the wires that had the ground straps on them. Yes, we have. We did some stuff with the guys from Kenny Bell, and it didn't really work out very well. Mike, I think that's an excellent idea. I think, and it might be combined with something else. He said that he thinks I should test the flipped air cleaner lid on the Q-Jet, and I've never actually tested that. I mean, we've run that a lot out on the street and stuff back in the day, but I don't ever remember actually doing that on the in the car. The thing that's interesting is when you flip that and if you have enough room and you flip the lid over, you have an open element filter. Some of it is exposed normally. And what happens is you end up drawing hot air, although most of those air cleaner lids had a snorkel on them and they were kind of drawing hot air anyway. What exactly is a 3/4 race cam? Well, you know what a race cam is, right? A 3/4 race cam is not all the way to race. It's like mostly race. It's partly race. Did you send Steve home with the head for the Atlas? Oh no, I know he's not going to port that. But we have somebody that's going to do that, so that won't be a problem. At what temperature rise do you decide you need a bigger intercooler? ATS racing. I would, first thing I would be concerned with if you're getting that much of a temperature rise is what is the pressure drop across the core? Do you have a flow restriction? Is that part of the problem? And does anybody know about who's my go-to people for having a set of these 3800 Series 2 heads ported? And we know ZZP and Intense, and is there somebody else out there that's done good work? Julius, don't worry, you're not going to lose me. I'm here, man. I'm here for you. Richard, when you're tuning Spark Advanced, let's see. I want to read the tuning question. When you're tuning Spark Advanced for a new combo at minimum boost, what kind of change do you see at MBT point as you raise boost? We don't. What I go off of, and I don't know how other people do it, is I go off of experience of other things, and we usually overshoot on octane. So even if I'm running 7 pounds, normally we would put race gas in it, and then I would go up to, at 7 or 8 pounds in some kind of normal thing. Let's take an LS, for example. If I'm running an LS, I would probably go to 22 or 23 pounds, only because I know with that octane and that boost and that temperature that's going to be safe. I never go to all of it. I don't look for the maximum amount of power usually, because it's not, you find that right before the thing blows up. Would you ever run O2 as a supplementary oxygen? Are you talking about ozone? Can we see some E85 twin charge goodness on the 3800 at some point? I've already done that, Bert. I already ran the turbo with the supercharger. And I'm not going to do a big bang with a twin charge deal, because that's going to be an astronomical kind of boost level, and there's no reason to do that. What you want to do if you're trying to make lots of power and find out how much power it can take is you need to get rid of the supercharger. It's cool as a twin charge deal, and running around like that would be awesome, and it helps the response of a big turbo if you put that on there. But if you're trying to make a lot of power from it, it's just in the way. On the 3800, I've already run headers, air intake, pulleys, E85, adding the turbo to it, and then I have planned ported heads, cam. If I can, if it's not too difficult, I'd like to do the Gen 3 blower versus the Gen 5 blower, if that's an easy swap. I haven't looked at the two to see. Maybe more inlet stuff. Honestly, I'm not too interested in running the blower all the way up. I've already run the thing near 15 pounds, and it's not, I don't like running a roots blower that high, even with the 85, without an intercooler, and there's not an intercooler on there right now. An intercooler would be a good test on that. But ultimately, this thing needs to have a turbo on it. Also, Admiral, who's the best guy to get a Fuel Tech harness made by? James Lynn is the only harness guy I know, but I don't know if he would do that. Did Steve eat the donut? No, I think they threw that away. I think they took that away and didn't. I can't believe they did that. Dirty Penny, hey Richard, I love your content. I put an M90 on my 4.9 liter V8. What kind of motor is that? Is it a Cadillac or something? Well, why do we need to run absolute air pressure? I don't. Nobody does that. Everybody that's out there that runs a turbo motor or a blower motor has a boost gauge. I went through this discussion with Gale Banks. He wants me to run his. I don't know. Somebody tell me what the name of his thing that he's selling is. That charge density or something. And while I think Gale Banks is awesome and has done great things, that's not where the market is. At least the market that goes to junkyards with me and puts turbos on stuff. They're not doing that. They're doing a boost gauge and then finding out how much it makes at a given boost. All right, John, thanks, man. Yeah, there shouldn't be any hostility. I don't know why there would be. When you decide to go with something other than a standard volume oil pump, we do that, and this seems like a simplistic answer, but we do it when we need more oil. Like if you have two turbos and you have fairly big orifices to feed the turbo, that's extra oil that you need. So in that case, something like that, it might be a good idea. We also look at increasing the flow rate of the oil depending on what we do with the clearances on the rod and main bearings. I gotta drop down here. Yeah, DMC book. We're DMC Bigfoot. We're working without you. 4.9 Cadillac. Okay, that's right. Lance over at Keith Craft. I've dealt with those guys back in the 5-liter Mustang days. Richard sent you an email about the intercooler piping, trying to figure out if it's worth going from 2.5 up to 3-inch, turbo 5.3, make a little over 700 wheel horsepower. I don't think you're going to see very much there. I don't think that that's your restriction. Yep, Rye, I agree. It's all about data. Oh, Julius, you blew up your Barra. Stock BF, lost compression in 2 cylinders. Think it's a ring. That's not good. Yeah, I think we've flipped all the pistons we're going to flip. I think that's been answered. It's the Banks data monster. Do bearing clearances have a big effect on horsepower? I don't think so. If they're too tight, it really does. But I don't think if they're too loose, it does. We were wondering about that. When I take the Magnum apart after we did this piston flip test, we looked at the bearings. So right away, we shouldn't have done that. But the rod bearings, a lot of them were down to copper. I don't know how many miles this thing has on it, but they were down to copper. So when I take it back apart and flip the pistons back the way that they're supposed to go, I will put ring gap in it, and I also probably put new bearings in it. French onion, I hope I wasn't included in that group. We have 1301. The cam is a BTR stage 4, but we didn't port the heads. You don't need to port the head on that motor, Jeff. That's more than enough flow already. Yeah, I saw the video that Gail did critiquing the Hoonigan diesel build. Brian, revisiting some 2.2, 2.5 discussion about timing. When we started it up, it had 20 degrees. I disabled adaptive retard and did some testing the other week on my 2.5 G head. 13.4 degree. Wow, 13.4. That's a lot more precise. Timing on. Hang on. I want to see if it was on pump gas. Pump 13.4 degrees of timing at 23 psi. That seems like a lot. Or you have a really good intercooler. That's awesome. Andy, you've asked that question again. I don't know the answer to that. If a motor has a greater rate of acceleration on a chassis dyno, would it show up as more horsepower on the engine dyno? I can tell you this, when we see changes on the chassis dyno, because I've done both of them, when we see changes on the chassis dyno and it has a greater acceleration rate, we see power changes on the engine dyno. So we put an intake manifold, and like we do a fast intake manifold versus a stock truck manifold. It will change the rate of acceleration on the dyno because that's how it shows horsepower. We'll see that on the engine dyno also. So a lot of the things are the same. The thing is that the horsepower gain that you get on the chassis dyno and on the engine dyno is going to be different. One, because the chassis dyno is already going to be lower than the engine dyno is. So part of it is that. You can look at it as a percentage thing. But also it seems a little bit different on the chassis dyno, which that's the thing that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the fact that one's already lower because you have the drivetrain and the accessories and different temperature and all that stuff. I'm talking about there's a change there that's not just a function of that change in percentage. You want brake-specific air consumption number or brake-specific fuel consumption data from the piston flip. So what would you suspect those would be if the power and if the power was exactly the same? What would you think that those would be? Ross goes out. Jay, oil pumps do indeed affect power. The guys have tested that. I remember looking at all the pumps that they had. They tested high volume, high pressure, all kinds of stuff. And when you change the drag of the pump, it definitely changes power. Which is why if you look on cup motors and other forms of racing, they like to use the minimal amount of pressure that's required to make the engine safe. Dirty Peanut, that's not the right question. His question is, what is the most boost you would run on 9.5 to 1 compression with no intercore? I don't know what that motor is. I don't know what your cam timing is. I don't know what the air temperature is. I don't know any of that. So that's a loaded question. If I was trying to run the most boost, I would put better fuel in it, or I would definitely get an intercooler. Easy Rider, if you want to go the low buck route, there's lots of cheap aluminum heads out there. TFS and AFR have really good heads for those. If you're not trying to make a ton of power, you don't need to spend that kind of money on it. Admiral, thank you very much. Hey, Richard, if you build a single overhead cam 4.75 stroker and couldn't go 4-valve because of engine bay clearances, what would you go with? 3-valve, trick flow, maybe overported. Is this a boosted motor? And if it's all NA, the 3-valve will flow more than the trick flow 2-valve head will. And I think it will make more power. The thing that I don't know, are there other problems with the 3-valve stuff? If you can, and the other thing that 3-valve will give you, if you can run it, is variable cam timing. And the variable cam timing will definitely help you make more power than a 2-valve combination will. Tyler, now Richard needs an NA 3800 to complete the recipe. I'll tell you what I do want to use is we ran the long tube. I ran the long tube header test on this supercharged motor. So we ran the ones that come for a front wheel drive application. What I want to run on there now is I want to run actual long tube headers. I'm sure that they're 3-into-1s. I would imagine. I want to run them from a Camaro. So who makes Camaro or Firebird 3800 headers, long tube headers, like for that chassis? Because we could run those on the dyno and then run kind of a conventional exhaust and not this crossover exhaust that we run. I think that would be interesting to see if there's a difference in power from that compared to the two kinds of headers. Probe Charge Mopar, people streaming in from Uncle Tony. I sent Tony a message today. I told him I wanted to be on there. I want to come talk to them. I talked to David Vizard quite a bit today about all of the stuff and the things that I thought, and I just talked to everybody here about the same thing. There's more stuff to discuss. And like I said, a lot of the guys are making this into an East Coast, West Coast, Big Epoch kind of thing, and it's not that at all. That's nonsense. The guys from Motor Trend, Steve and David, they don't dislike Tony. I'm hoping Tony doesn't dislike them. I don't dislike any of them. So none of that is real. All of that is coming from the animosity of the viewers, I think. And I'm sure Tony is stirring that too, because let's face it, Tony's on YouTube and this is how he's making his living. He's got a bigger channel than I do. He makes more money. He has more viewers, all of that. So if he gets some sort of controversy going, that's good for him. I mean, it helps people. You know, people are going to watch stuff just the same way that it sells records for Death Row Records. Chad, the first 3800 video is already posted. That's up right now, and I'm hoping to do another one tomorrow. Oh, cool, Robert. You got a 90 Fox body, old school Kenny Bell 1.7. Nice, I like it. Yeah, and everybody throw a like up there. Come on, we got lots of people here and very few likes. I'm starting to take it personally. Ben thinks Pacesetter makes Camaro headers. Are you listening for knock? The 3800 is knock limited on timing. It's not when we put good fuel in it. I ran 24, I have to look at the data, maybe as much as 25 degrees of timing on the 3800. Did we do water meth on the compound? No, I did not. It is one of the things that I would like to try, and I have a snow water meth kit, and I would like to put that in there. The thing that I want to do more than anything else on the supercharged version of the 3800 is I want to bring the boost down. I don't want to run high boost on that. I want to make the motor a lot more efficient with heads and cam and maybe intake before we run lots of boost with it, because I would rather have this thing make a lot of power at 10 pounds. Burned out. Hey, I picked up a set of AFR 220 heads for $200. That's a good deal. It has a crack in the bowl I need to fix. Do you think that might be too much for a 350? I'm using an Isky cam. If you're using a 260 at 50, that's a real cam, and it's 500 lift. Is this for a class or something that you're running in? A 260 at 50 cam needs a lot more lift than that. Uh-oh. Trisha saying he's done. He's done with me. He didn't answer my question. He didn't answer my. I sent him a text message today. He didn't answer it. I told David to tell him that I want to come back on, and it would be really silly of him to take this personally. That's nonsense. I told him to his face, camera, that I was going to do this test and that I wanted to do it, and that I did, and all I wanted was data. So it would be really silly of him to react this way. Lots of guys think the 3800 only wants 15 degrees. It wants more than that, even with pump gas. We ran more timing than that with pump gas, and a lot more than that with E85. Daniel, Freiberger and Dulcich go back like decades. So the relationship that they have is not, it's like being around your guys, being around your boys, you know. Sometimes we're abrasive. That's part of the deal. I'm not so much with them because I don't know them as well as those two know each other. So I'm the outsider, but you know, you can say things to your best friend that you can't say to other people. Rex is saying, no, I just got off their channel. They love you guys. David's great. So are you. Thank you very much. Good. I'm glad to hear it. I don't want there to be any problems. I'm looking forward to, I want to do something with this Magnum. I told David I wanted to do something with Vizard and Tony on this Magnum and put it in a car and run it. If we can do that, that would be awesome. 98 Firebird with 3800 and 5-speed donor for the Nova Boost project. I appreciate the offer, but we might be doing something that you guys would really like with the Nova. I need to firm that up first before I would announce that. But it is getting a motor and it's getting something cool, and we'll definitely do burnouts and stuff. And this 3800, and now that I have two of them, I'm thinking now if I take the heads off the L67, that it probably will be okay too. The pistons seem to be fairly strong in these, and I haven't done ring gap on the 3800 yet, which I plan to do. Jeff Smith, next question. To port the Eaton 1.9 liter, the claims are 40 to 85 horsepower. That seems like a lot. The pulleys are 2.55 and 9.1. And this now is work. Are you talking about 9.17 inches in diameter on the crank pulley? Oh, it's an old grind. Okay. Yeah, 500 is pretty low lift for that sort of duration. How do you feel about testing your 3.8 turbo without a blower back to back, pull the snout and screws out, and then block off the snout flange? Let's see what we have to do. We have to make a plate. We'd have to make a cover plate for that, right? I mean, that could be done. That's not a good intake. It's not a good, like the blower casing is actually not terrible, I don't think. It'll have lots of sharp edges that it has to go through, but although maybe not. But the inside of the plenum is going to go like this, so I don't think it's ideal. But the lower manifold is not good. It's not going to make nearly as much power as it will if we put a long runner manifold in it. James, this was 62 thousandths pin offset. And Tim, I think, did the calculations, and it was 0.9 degrees. They're not too much head for a 350. And somebody, here we go. I need to get G Money. Aloha. I hope you're from the island. You look a little dehydrated. Have an E85 on the rocks or in the Pineapple State. Awesome. That's fantastic. That's one of the first things that we got when we went to Hawaii for summer vacation. Obviously, you got to get a drink with an umbrella in it, which we did right away. But also, you know, one of my favorite things when I go there is pineapple. So anything that's like I have it for breakfast, and I kind of OD on pineapple. It's awesome. But so thank you very much. How high inlet air temperature? Too high. That's going to vary with octane. So if you have lots of octane, 150 is not going to be too bad. If it's 150 at 7 pounds, yeah, I wouldn't go up too much. Chad, L67 Gen 5 on E85 around 21 degrees, non-intercooled. Yeah, that worked on this one. Does the Gen 5 bolt right onto the, did you change the whole intake manifold and the Gen 5 onto the L67 heads and stuff? That answer almost sounds like you need to ask your wife if you can store another car on your lawn. No cars on the lawn. How do you feel about 1UZ with VVT? Does anybody offer aftermarket cams for those? The 3800 needs a Fiero. It does, really. The 3800 needs to go in the Nova. That would be awesome if you could get the thing to make, you know, like 600 or something, which I think is certainly possible. I have not pulled the 2.5. I've been down there for 2 weeks, and I have not even gone over there other than to steal something off of the distributor, I think. Is the Edelbrock dual quad small block Chevy air gap manifold any good? Casey, if you take a look at it, I think I might have a video up in there. I know I've done a test versus the excuse me, the standard air gap versus the dual quad, and the dual quad one actually does fairly good. It's not as good as the standard air gap. The ring gap is fairly large already. Yeah, does anybody know what the factory ring gap is in one of these supercharged applications? I'm gonna grab a beverage right now. I'll be right back. So you guys talk amongst yourselves. So I'm wondering what the factory did to the ring gap on those 3800 supercharged motors. I'm wondering if the factory gap is more than like the NA version. I wish I knew somebody at GM that would be able to tell me that. Can you overspin the blower and lose power? Yeah, you can. There's a limit to how far you can spin them. The blower will usually let you know by destroying itself. And the other thing that happens is and this is why you want to do everything that you can to bring the pressure down and the temperature down, is make as much power NA as you can before you start doing that. You'll see really, really high charge temperatures at high boost from a positive displacement roots blower. Yeah, Tyler, it doesn't hurt to check. I'm definitely going to check, because we have already had the heads off of this L32 2 or 3 times now, and so we're definitely going to. Ring gap is around 18 thousandths on the supercharged motor. Mondi 888 in Australia, we've got V6s doing 1,000 horsepower. That's a lot. I mean, overtime. No, it shows I'm at 58 minutes. Easy Rider, you've done a supercharged 3800 swap in a rural drive application using an F-body Camaro transmission. That's the bell housing that we have on the dyno right now. TS302, I've already done that. Gail Banks lost power with turbos feeding a supercharger. It gained a lot of power. With the turbos feeding the supercharger, it made more power than just the supercharger, obviously. I haven't run it with just a turbo. With just a turbo, it will make more power at that same boost level. Try to breathe in some water. What year is the 3800? The one that I got was from a 2004 Pontiac Grand Prix GTP. Man, I can't breathe in the water. Rex, yeah, David Vizard you're talking about is a class act. He's a good guy. He's done a lot of stuff. I mean, he's been testing forever and ever. Richard, can you expand on what you meant on the hybrid cam longevity and how bad was the maintenance on the hybrid setup? Are you talking about the solid roller hydraulic roller thing? If you are, what I'm talking about is putting solid rollers on a hydraulic roller profile, and you can do that, but then you have the same issue because of the solid roller lifter. That's the problem, is that I don't think that the solid roller lifter was designed for daily use. So guys have had issues with that. And also, since it's solid, you have to, what they say is continually check the lash on it. Now, normally, if you're going to put it on a hydraulic roller cam, you're going to tight lash the thing, so it's going to be at 3 or 4 thousandths or something like that. But still, since it's, you know, you might have to check it because it's still essentially a solid. And I don't think that I would trust, right, like if I put a hydraulic roller in something, look at all the factory hydraulic roller stuff, it lasts, like look at an LS hydraulic roller, it lasts hundreds of thousands of miles. I don't think a solid roller is going to do that. I don't think it's going to be anywhere near that. I think it's going to be thousands of miles and not hundreds of thousands of miles. A 243 and a 408 stroke LQ4, will they flow enough? Yeah, they flow enough to support about, I don't know, 550 horsepower, let's say. A Toyota V8 episode, I haven't run one of those yet. What's the difference between an L32 and an L67? Compression and blower, I think, are kind of the major things. I don't know if there's any change in cam timing or not. But the twin charge will leave the hole a lot nicer in a manual. Yeah, I would agree. And like we've always talked about, the roots blower will help the thing, will help spool up a bigger turbo if you have that. If you have a turbo that will already spool up at, let's say, 2,000 RPM, and you run it on an NA motor and it's going to work just fine, and then you add the blower to that, you're not going to enhance spool very much because it's already spooled up. So in that case, the blower is kind of in the way. Put a Ford V10 in the Nova, that would definitely be unique. Yeah, the bleed off at high RPM, and that's the thing. You're trading off two things. Where you're trading off one thing for another. You have problems with hydraulic rollers anyway. You have problems with repeatability of the hydraulic roller. You have problems with the longevity of the hydraulic roller of aftermarket stuff, and you have problems with them running high RPM also. New to the channel, welcome. You're building a 1960 Beetle LS with twin turbos. That sounds like a heck of a project. I would be interested in the parasitic loss numbers. I'm thinking around 100 horsepower at 450 crank. Are you talking about the parasitic loss of driving the supercharger? Richard, with pushrod engines being so successful, what's the benefit of an overhead cam? Well, typically overhead cams are done with 4-valve deals, so it makes more power because of the head flow, and it also can rev more. I wonder why I just lost my camera here. There we go. Okay, last question of the night. I do have to get going. A hot mess. Tim, he wants you to explain a rev kit. Not very many people use those anymore. Vermonster's here. I would love to test a rotary. Somebody needs to get me one. Dan's Garage. So would you say that the piston flip wouldn't work on any engine regardless of the amount of offset or rotating geometry based on one test? I wouldn't say that at all. I would say that this shows when we tested it on this motor with this kind of offset that it did nothing. So if it did a little bit, we would say, okay, maybe more offset would lead us in that direction, or maybe, and we talked about all this, maybe more RPM, maybe a different combination. Obviously, I haven't tested every combination. But I would be very surprised if I tested this on a Ford or a Chevy or anything else of this kind of power and RPM range. I'd be very surprised if it did anything on any of those either. Is there a fitment issue putting the 4200 in the Nova? I don't know. Calvin's put them in a lot of stuff, so I would think it would fit in a Nova. I'm actually pretty good at flipping pizzas. I used to work at a pizza place. The solid roller keeps in contact with the camshaft and doesn't get beat up. I think you mean hydraulic roller there that has constant pressure on it, because the solid roller has lash. Do you follow Rob Dom? I don't think so. A 4200 in the Nova would be really good. Okay, guys, I got to get going. Thank you all for showing up and showing support. So somebody please go over and tell Uncle Tony that I would love to be on a show again, and we could talk about all this stuff. And actually, there's a lot more stuff to talk about. I want to do something with him on a Magnum, and I want the motor to actually go in a car and do some hit somewhere. I wanted to see it go out and make 400 horsepower or whatever on the dyno, and then go out and run at the drag strip and see what it does. Maybe go to the chassis dyno in the interim also and find out what's happening. I think that would be good stuff. I would just like to see all the fruits of our labor from there go out there and see it do something cool. Thank you guys for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow. Do 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 do.